podcast. We are here with your hosts, Dave Reed, Ryan Wilkinson, and Joey Gallo.
Welcome in to the NSFW Dynasty podcast. I am your host, Dave Reed, joined by my co-hosts, Joey Gallo and Ryan Wilkinson. How you boys doing?
Doing good. Not doing super great in fantasy, sitting at 1-2 in both of my leagues, but still early, hoping to turn it around a little bit.
Yeah, we're hanging in. We're like the Giants right now. We're down 14-9 at the half. We're not looking great, but we're getting by. We're hanging in.
Yeah,
exactly.
Unfortunately, I cannot relate because your boys 3-0, baby, ran the division. Despite the haters. No, it's been honestly, my division is I've been the only team that hasn't had a massive amount of injuries, so I'm kind of just surviving through attrition. But I'll take it. It doesn't matter. Long season, boys.
You take them how you can get them.
I know. But yeah, I mean, how'd you guys enjoy last week? How were the games aside from your fantasy teams?
Yeah, it was a weird week, but I thought that the breadth of games in the afternoon slate was kind of nice. Like 5 games, and the higher total games are in the afternoon, and it was just like that was nice to just like in the middle of the afternoon or the middle of like the morning slate not feel like it's like 2 or 3 shitty games and then the day's over. It was 5 good games and then a good Sunday night game. So I wish they would do that more often, but
yeah. I mean, two games on Monday night as well. Having that first Monday night game start a little earlier was nice too, so you can actually watch a good chunk of both games.
Yeah, it was definitely nice. I liked having because I almost get the Sunday scaries too early if there's only like 3 games in the afternoon. Like this made me I was like, oh no, I'm having like a full day. This is nice. And the Monday night, I always thought it's kind of weird that they stagger, like they have them at the same time, but they staggered them at a good enough time where the half times overlap, so you were always having at least some type of football going on, which was kind of nice as well. And with YouTube TV, not a sponsor, but they have the dual split screen, which was pretty awesome because I just had both games on at the same time, going back and forth. I also had some pretty big bets on those games that came in on Monday night, so it was like I was like going back and forth, like, come on, what's going to happen here? But yeah, overall, it was a lot of fun and weird week in some of the outcomes, but fortunately not as many injuries as we've experienced through the first 2 weeks, but still a couple of injuries that we want to keep an eye on. So just going to run through them pretty quickly. At quarterback, Justin Herbert, he was going into the game with a bum ankle. He left early. He re-aggravated that ankle. Taylor Heineke came in to replace him. X-rays are negative. It sounds like he might play this week, actually, but they have a week 5 bye, so if the team wants to be cautious, they may sit him. We'll see how that goes. Sam Darnold did leave the game briefly with a knee injury. Came back in, though. Sounds like it was a bone bruise and should be good to go this week. And Jordan Love, he ultimately sat week 3. Green Bay won. Malik Willis actually looked pretty good. I believe it was against his old team anyway. And he has a real shot, Jordan Love, at playing this week against the Vikings. So we'll see how that goes. At wide receiver, Devonta Smith got concussed on a pretty nasty and kind of dirty-looking hit, to be honest. So he's likely going to be out this week. Adam Thielen is on the IR with a hamstring injury after making a great touchdown catch, so he went out on top. Tank Dell has a pretty painful rib injury. He's day-to-day, but it's looking like he's probably going to miss this week. And at tight end, Sam Laporta has a low ankle sprain, currently day-to-day. Don't know how that's going to trend yet. Trey McBride had a concussion. He's looking very questionable for week 4 in a plus-plus matchup that you would love for him to be in, but it's very much questionable. And George Kittle missed last week, but he logged a limited practice today on Thursday, so there's actually a decent chance he gets in, which could take a couple targets away from someone we'll talk about a little bit later. But any of those injuries stand out to you? Anything you think I missed at all? I think everything else is kind of spilled previous weeks, I think.
Yeah, I just think that the tight end landscape is brutal. I mean, Laporta and McBride are supposed to be 2 of your top tight ends, and now they're a little bit injured. So it's hard to get a consistent startable tight end right now. And then, I don't know, if you're the Packers and you're winning, Do you rush Jordan Love back? Do you maybe let him sit another game? I feel like there's no real need there to get him in, but it sounds like he might play, so we'll see if he ends up out there.
Yeah, it's a tough call, right? At home in division, it's a game that he being Love really obviously wants to be out there for, so it's probably tough to get him to sit if he was close to playing last week. He probably will play. I think I'm excited to see him back out there for the whole Green Bay offense, although like you said, they've been looking pretty good with Malik Willis, so
yeah, definitely be good for their wide receivers. Team's been winning and doing okay, but wide receivers for fantasy has not been great.
Yeah,
for sure. And the Vikings are actually a very strong defense. That's actually one of the reasons why I bet CJ Stroud's under yards last week, and he had a terrible game. So I'm not sure how Malik Willis would fare if Stroud is getting shaken by him. But also, like as Joe mentioned, it's an in-division game, and they're 3-0, the Vikings. So if they win that, you're going to be 2 games back. So it is actually kind of an important game for the Packers to try and get a win there. I feel like he's probably going to go, and I think some of the books actually have him on there, so I think they're leaning that way as well.
Yeah, and then I think the only other thing I wanted to mention, in regards to the wide receivers, I feel like there's going to be some good value created by some of these injuries. Like,
don't say Devon Dotson. Do not.
No, definitely not. Although I was thinking about it, frankly, and it might be a thing.
Don't do it.
Houston at home against Jacksonville, who is terrible. And if Tank Dell does not play, I think that's a get right game for CJ Stroud. So I would be looking to play Nico Collins.
Yeah.
Over, like I was thinking was maybe like the alternate over 100 yards. I just kind of feel like it's going to be a big game for him, and that might be worth a look in a game where I think the Texans, like I said, the offense is looking to get back on track. And Philly, I'll let you talk about Carolina later, because I think lots of opportunity with. I wouldn't necessarily say, opportunity as much as reinforcement for the guys that are out there. Like, last week I found myself trying to choose between Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson for props and parlays and touchdown scorer. Granted, they both scored. At least this week, you don't really have to choose. You can just hammer away on Deontay Johnson. And Philly, I think I'm going to just keep riding Saquon Barkley until that stops working successfully, because right now I just kind of feel like, especially if both of their starting wide receivers are out in the passing game, he gets targets to begin with. I think he'll continue to get targets. So, and I mean, he gets his red zone usage is pretty absurd. So yeah, Saquon Barkley is really good. And I think they said on when they were doing the recap on the Ballers this week that he would be in contention for number one if you were redrafting right now. He would probably be in contention for first overall, which it's hard to disagree with, because it's been pretty multiple touchdowns in 3 out of the 4 or 2 out of the 4. So pretty good.
Also, this is we're not in the gambling section, but I still don't understand why the Eagles are favored in that game. But I'm all on the Bucks. They're playing the Bucks, right? So I don't see. I don't see how the Eagles offense does much outside of Barkley, and the Bucks offense should do plenty against that defense. But I digress. It's not the gambling section, but I'm just throwing that out there. It doesn't make sense to me.
For what it's worth, I think the line opened and immediately got bet down.
Yeah, it's still like -1.5 or -2 or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bucks also didn't look great last week, so it's not like we're talking a powerhouse team.
Yeah. But I think who they played, the Lions last week. I think the Lions are significantly better than the current week Eagles.
Yeah.
Again, they played the Broncos.
The Broncos. Yeah.
Oh, that was it. You're right.
Not the gambling section, but for what it's worth, I feel like there are like at least 3 games this week, and they're the first 3 that I'm like looking at on the slate where it just, like, based upon last week, the choice feels so obvious. And I think I might just go the other way in both, right? So like
Yeah.
Jets at home laying 7.5 against Denver. It feels like Denver coming off last week is just like, oh, come on. Like, they can cover 7.5 against the Jets. The Jets run the ball a lot. Like they haven't been that impressive. And then next one, Carolina getting 4.5 at home against terrible Bengals. Again, seems really obvious. Carolina plus 4.5. And then we just talked about Tampa Bay at home or, plus 1.5 against Philly. I
almost feel like Vegas is baiting me into bad bets.
Yeah, it just feels like I might have to take the Jets and the Bengals, and I'm not taking Philly, so maybe not that one. But
I'm definitely not taking Philly.
The Jets and the Bengals might be worth a look, but we'll see.
We'll see. But getting back into week 3, now that we have 3 weeks into the season, starting to see some trends and storylines of how the season is developing. Kind of want to just touch upon it and kind of get your guys' thoughts, opine a little bit on how you think this is trending. But first thing that stuck out to me is just how bad a lot of the perceived top quarterbacks have been playing. I feel like there have only been maybe 3 to 4 really good quarterback play from the players you actually expected good quarterback play out of. Mahomes has been real bad. I think the ballers talked about he's had like one game with 20 points dating back to last season of like 13 straight weeks. He's just not putting up points. He's got bad weapons. Rasheed Rice not a downfield threat. Kelsey looks washed, and Worthy looked kind of like Hardman, which I said in preseason. Last 2 weeks, 2 catches for 17 yards. CJ Stroud is disappointed a bit so far. This might be a get right week, but to this point, not that great. Hurts was terrible last week, and he's had more turnovers this year than Daniel Jones has. I think he might actually have double. Lawrence, which I know a lot of people here hate, he looks worse each every week so far. So I'm just going to say he does look worse. And Anthony Richardson, it looks like a rookie. This past week was one of the worst quarterback play games out there. But how are you guys feeling about the overall quarterback play that you've seen, especially from the perceived top half?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it quite a bit, especially Mahomes. He finished almost outside of the top 10 last year, and coming into this year, it's just been more of the same. And Hurts has actually been decent for fantasy. I think he had over 20 fantasy points 2 of the 3 games, but definitely not looking like a top 5 QB where you were probably drafting him. And then
that was also a lot on rushing. So I'm thinking more.
Actual
quarterbacking.
It's mostly rushing. Quarterbacking hasn't been great. And like you said, Lawrence and Richardson just not looking great. Richardson did miss last year, so I guess we can kind of count him as a rookie, and he's having some growing pains. But Lawrence at this point, I know it's a heated debate in our league a lot, but I was always on the positive side and kind of, viewed him a little higher than everyone else, but you definitely got to start to question that at this point. He just has not been able to turn it around at all. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And then we talked about it last week, just some surprising quarterbacks having really hot starts like a Sam Darnold or a Derek Carr. Or, I know Baker Mayfield wasn't great last week, but the first 2 weeks looked great. So kind of a bit of a change up in the quarterbacks compared to what we thought going into the season.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of like, I think if you were to ask me what my thoughts on like the first 3 weeks would it be like holistically about, just like the overall league, it would be, like a lot of surprising teams that we didn't really expect to be looking really good. Obviously, like Minnesota is a good example. Pittsburgh's defense is better than it even historically has been, it seems, right? Like they're looking a lot of teams that you weren't really, or not a lot, but a handful. And it's kind of just, gets back to the parity in the league. And at the quarterback position specifically, I'm not totally sure if it's like a defensive type thing, like defensive schemes or like the 2 high safeties. Like, I don't know, but like offenses have been beating the 2 high safety in other like creative ways, like, like last year, so it's not, I don't want to say like it's all, but it's just, in general, I will say it's been a little surprising to see some of these like big name quarterbacks get off to a slow start, but it also might just be small sample size. And, like in CJ Stroud's case, like Houston's looked like a pretty good team, and they had a bad week last week. And I get the feeling that after they play Jacksonville at home, we'll be having a different conversation about them next week. So, and Mahomes, the Chiefs are winning games. So although like he's
Yeah.
not really delivering for fantasy, he's still delivering on the field. So hard to really argue that.
Yeah, Mahomes might be the new Tom Brady, where he was great in the field and no one wanted him on your fantasy team because you just didn't put on points.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you touched a good point. Like the defenses have changed. They've been a lot of zone in the past before. Now these two high safety and man is being played a lot more. So like I think it might be small sample size where teams will adjust now that they're seeing how defenses are playing. But offense across the board has kind of been down as a result of these quarterbacks being down. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to bounce back, but like Ryan, you did mention it too. There's been quarterbacks that have been popping up that you didn't expect. Like Jaden Daniels looks absolutely amazing, incredible. So Joe, I know you got him in the rookie draft. This last Monday Night Football game, like we knew he was a good rusher, and in college he was supposed to be a great downfield passer, but we didn't see it that much the first two games of the season. My God, he looked incredible. He broke the record on completion percentage by a rookie at 90.1% or something like that. In that last throw to Terry McLaurin in the end zone while he was getting hit to win the game. This guy, you can already tell. Like when you saw CJ Stroud winning games, you could tell this guy's different. Daniels looks different, but I don't know if you guys felt the same way. But I'm very impressed with the rookie so far.
Yeah, no, he made two downfield throws to McLaurin in that game where I was very, very hyped after. And overall, I mean, he just looked like he had so much control of the whole offense, the whole game,
confidence, but calm.
They went for it on fourth down several times, and you just kind of felt like he was going to make the right read and the right throw, and he hasn't been getting blown up too much from a running standpoint, which I know
a couple times too.
Yeah. So, I'm excited. It's interesting that, what were when we went back and we talked about top 4 picks in the rookie draft, it was Caleb Williams 1, Marvin Harrison 2, Malik Neighbors 3, Jaden Daniels 4.
Yeah. And I was just going to mention that. Yeah, we got to do that again in a couple weeks and see where it ends up. But as right now, you got to question it.
Yeah, and it's just the quarterbacks, right? If you had to go back and do it again, right? Maybe you swap Daniels and Williams, or I don't even know. But from a wide receiver standpoint, I Harrison and Neighbors have looked incredible too. So with as good as Daniels has been, I would if Canelo's offered me Neighbors for Daniels tomorrow, I'd take it straight up. So
yeah, Neighbors and Harrison look all world, and they're going to be around for a while.
So, it's nice to see the top guys are looking nice, except for Caleb. But
Caleb looks real bad. But it's still early for him. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, the one thing, just going back to Dan's real quick, that I love, you mentioned the fourth down. I don't know if you saw it at the end of the game where I think it was 4th and 3, and they could have kicked a field goal, but they wanted to, if they got a first down, it would effectively end it or make it much tougher. And Daniels was adamant, is we need to go. And he was going to the coach, and the coach was yes, okay, we'll do this. Get it. And I'm all right, because a lot of rookies would be nervous in that situation. It was in control of the game and knew it. So this guy is going to be very good. I also want to throw out honorable mention Andy Dalton. Bryce Young couldn't do anything. Andy Dalton had more points in the first 6 minutes than Bryce had the first 2 games. He went for over 300 and 3 touchdowns. They scored 30-something points. So it kind of really hurts the value of Bryce Young, I feel like. But
it's so bad for Bryce Young. Dalton comes in and immediately just turns the offense around and dominates. You got to feel bad for Young because, it just made him look that much worse.
Yeah, but it elevates the rest of the Panthers' weapons, which, again, we'll get to later. Another trend I've been seeing is just the rookie running backs. So every year, 1 or 2 rookie running backs always crack the top 24 for that in scoring for that year. And this year wasn't a strong rookie running back class, but there were 4 that were probably the top 4 picked in your draft. They're top 4, I believe, in the NFL draft. But they haven't done much. You got Brooks, who's on the IR, coming back hopefully soon. Benson, who hasn't really done anything yet. Corum is not really getting work. And Marshawn Lloyd is back on the IR. The guy just can't get healthy. So they've done nothing. But there have been rookie running backs that have been stepping up, and Braylon Allen and Bucky Irving, who look like massive values right now and could actually push to be a top 24 back, it's looking like. And you even have like Ray Davis and even Carson Steele now, who are technically rookies who are starting to get in. So just want to get your thoughts on like the rookie running back class. And like, to me, the takeaway is I'm not drafting rookie running backs early in drafts anymore. I'm going wide receivers and quarterbacks. That's it. But I don't know where you guys are at.
Yeah, I think going into the rookie draft, it was kind of known that it wasn't a great running back class. I don't remember when the first running back was taken in ours, but it was a while into the draft. But yeah, I think you at least this year you hit on some of the later running backs, and the earlier running backs haven't hit. But a guy like Carson Steele, I don't think he was even drafted. I think he was picked up off waivers, and
I believe so.
he had 17 carries. So obviously injuries play a part in some of this, but definitely looking like you can get some running back value later on, and maybe it's not worth taking an early pick on one.
Yeah, I feel like it's way more of a crapshoot. Like I picked Bucky Irving in a couple leagues that I'm in, Dynasty leagues, that I just like. There was one league that we were in with Ray, who was on our pod a couple of weeks back, where as soon as I made the pick, he texted me like, "Really, Bucky Irving?" And like it's just kind of like it's just like a lottery ticket. Like at the time, I'm just like, well, Rachaad White stinks, so let's go with Bucky Irving, right? I've watched him play at Oregon; he's pretty explosive. Let's go for it.
And guess what? Rachaad White still stinks.
It's not looking good.
And like from a redraft standpoint, it's frustrating owning these guys, especially early in the season, because that like a lot of them just like the Braylon Allen and Bucky Irving situations are like a little more unique and one off than like rookie wide receivers who like more commonly start out hot. And now I'm stuck with like Trey Benson on my bench in leagues where I need running back depth, and I don't want to drop him because the second I drop him, then James Conner's going to get hurt, and I'm going to have to throw 100 fab to get him back.
Yep.
So he's just burning a roster spot for me, and it's just a tough situation with the rookie running backs for sure.
Yeah, and it also tells me that the NFL is not great at evaluating running backs either. Because think about like Allen, Irving, Ray Davis, like Steele, these are all later guys, and they're providing a lot of value on NFL teams. The early round picks are not doing much, and it's not like these guys didn't have like solid starters in front of them. That's one of the reasons why Braylon Allen, I think most people went away from. A lot of people like him. He's the youngest NFL player like ever. He's not even 21 yet, and he fell in the draft to like the 4th or 5th round, I think. And then you got Breece Hall in front of him, but they're going to split time now. Like I don't think anyone ever thought that Breece Hall would be splitting time with Allen, and like Allen's getting like double-digit touches. So yeah, it's a crapshoot at running back. But if you got these guys, you got pretty good value. Because I think in rookie drafts, they didn't go earlier than like Irving, maybe a little earlier, but that was like late second, probably 3rd or later for most of these guys.
Yeah.
But one also will touch down to something like wide receiver love. Just want to talk Juwan Jennings. Got to talk about it. Like 41-point explosion in our league. I think he went 11 for 12 targets, 11 catches for 175 and 3 touchdowns. We kind of alluded to him at points in the past. I think going into this last week, I mentioned that I was starting him and was hoping for a big week. That was bigger than I expected. But wanted to get your thoughts on Jennings and his outlook moving forward, because obviously this was someone that wasn't viewed very highly. There's a lot of competition. A lot of people were hurt. But what do you think of his actual dynasty value going forward?
I mean, it's definitely up. I mean, I think he was buried on that team with all the talent, but it seems to be a team that's constantly injured. I mean, McCaffrey's out and now going to be out for a long time, and it seems like Debo's kind of always hurt, and AU has had some issues here and there. So, do I think he's going to explode and be this league winner? No, but do I think he has some value going forward? Definitely, especially with the injuries, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be a healthy team anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, if he obviously demonstrated that he has some chemistry with Purdy, but I also, I saw still something like 33 or 35% target share for Ayuk. I get the feeling that things will balance out this week. The receiving lines are not posted yet. And I know this is like my signature move, going back to the same bet the week after I've taken it and lost the week before. But I went to go look to see Brandon Ayuk's yardage total, and I guess my feeling on Jennings is probably a little bit more of a flash in the pan, and when Ayuk is operating at full strength and Debo's there and Kittle's there and McCaffrey's there, and he's much more likely and probably going to stick to being like a 3 to 4 target a game guy, as opposed to like turning into a stud wide receiver.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue for him is the depth chart. I think his skills are there. Like we saw, was in the Super Bowl. He was the best player basically for the 49ers then. He got extended. The team obviously likes him. And he was making catches at all three levels, contested, wide open, running good routes. So I think he is a very good player. Now, I don't think any team's going to value him over Kittle, Debo, Ayuk, CMC if he ever gets back. Although CMC is looking less and less likely to get back this year, so maybe Jennings will actually rise to the pecking order. But I think he will hold value. What I think this hurts most is Ricky Pearsall is going to have a much tougher path going through. He has to really prove it now, and he's already got a slow start. Some of it in his control, some of it out. Obviously, it's not his fault he got shot, but he was dealing with injuries before that. So I think he just has a murkier path going forward. Obviously, talent rises to the top, but that to me is the biggest takeaway. I also want to just throw out, I know we mentioned him, Malik Neighbors is just so good. I don't know if you watched last week, and I know Present Company did, but I hope all the listeners, he is not like just putting up huge stat lines. He's just the most fun player to watch, I feel like. The catches he makes, the routes he runs, he's just so good. So. Yeah, I know we talked about the Canales trade. What was it, last pod? Canales probably wins that trade. And then last storyline, and then Ryan, you kind of talked about it, but I just want to reiterate: the tight ends have just been bad this year. If you had going into the season a top tier elite tight end, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrew, Laporta, McBride, Kittle, Kincaid, you're kind of disappointed so far. So how are you guys feeling? I got Mike Gesicki that I picked up in free agency, and I'm like, honestly, he's been probably better than most of these guys so far. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's been really bad. The thing is, there haven't been any great tight ends. So you bench one of those guys for who? Who are you even throwing in over them? So it's been rough.
Yeah. I have Andrews, and I'm just going to keep rolling him out there because
he got a goose egg this past week.
He's a potentially better option than,
Yeah, he got a goose egg.
I don't love the idea of Tyler Conklin, or somebody in that range. I would rather
Dallas Goedert probably works this week though.
Goddard works, yeah.
But yeah, you're looking at guys like Goddard. Ferguson is probably like a pretty good bet here. Even Engram is a pretty reliable, and he got hurt in warm-ups. He didn't even get in the game. He got hurt. What's going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been weird. We'll see how things go. But definitely, you'll see it in probably a lot of your league standings. It may not be going the way you thought it was because some of these expectations are upside down. But with that, I want to jump into kind of on a related note because you go into a season, you have your startup ADPs if you're starting up a Dynasty League, and this is all based on perceived value, what you think is going to happen, and things change throughout the year. So what I was thinking would be kind of an interesting idea is we're going to go through the top 4 positions and look back on this the Dynasty Startup ADP over the past couple of years and take a look at the top 10 of these positions and see how many of those top 10 maintained that top 10 status in the following year and how many dropped out. Main reason for this is the top 10 is usually viewed as like the top elite players at those positions. They hold the most value. But we see time and time again, a lot of these players don't always maintain that value, and that means that other players are going to rise up in there. So kind of want to see if we can identify who we think currently are the ones that are at risk of losing that value and maybe throw out a couple players that we think can hop in. If some people drop out of the top 10, that means someone replaced them. So we can kind of, get our a crystal ball and see who that's going to be. So I'm going to jump into the quarterbacks real quick. And I look back in the past, for all these positions, I look back in the past 3 years. I used Fantasy Football Calculator for this ADP data, but dating back to 2021. On average at quarterback, of the top 10, about 4 of those players drop out every single year from the top 10. So that's nearly half, which is pretty surprising for a position that when you draft a quarterback, you're thinking that they're going to be around in your lineup in Dynasty, especially for years. So seeing that there's that much turnover, and actually last year you had 5, and some of the names that dropped out were Justin Herbert dropped to 12, so barely. Lawrence, we know, is dropping. Fields plummeted after losing his job. Deshaun Watson plummeted, and Dak barely slipped out. So going into this year, the top 10 that we had going into the current draft season was Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, C.J. Stroud, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Anthony Richardson, Jaden Daniels, and Jordan Love. So who of that group do you think is the most likely to fall out of the top 10? And again, we expect about 4 or so of these to fall out.
Who wants to take the free square?
Yeah, I was going to say, you got to say Richardson, right?
Yeah, Richardson is going to fall out.
He's definitely going to fall out if he doesn't turn it around soon.
Yeah.
Outside of that, though, I will say it is really tough. Daniels, I think it could rise, if anything. And the top 7, no one really sticks out to me that's like definitely going to fall out of there.
I have a spicy one.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm going to go with number 6, Joe Burrow. I worry about Burrow as a pocket passer on a team that's going to be terrible this year, and the wrist may not be like fully healed. He's actually like sneaky old. I think I heard today that I did hear today that he's actually older than Sam Darnold, which is interesting and hard to believe. But I just wouldn't be surprised. It's not like he was in the upper echelon of the higher range. He's outside the top 5. You named 10. He came in at number 6, and I just think people are realizing that the rushing upside is so critical for fantasy. So when you have guys like Daniels and Murray and Jackson and Hurts, and there's going to be more rookie hotness that comes in next year that always gets some hype for Dynasty. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Joe Burrow, one of the guys who dropped out.
So my pick is also spicy. It's very spicy, and when I have dropped out, I still think this guy he'll fall to like 11 or 12. So he's like barefoot up. Mahomes, if people actually look at stats, I don't think he will in reality because people know the name and the team's going to win. But he is not he hasn't in nearly a year provided the value that a player, especially viewed as number 1, should. And how are things going to get better throughout the year for him? Unless Worthy evolves, they don't have Hollywood. Kelsey, we'll see if he starts getting into better shape, but he's getting older. He's not getting more weapons. So, how does his value increase? And if he's not producing, he's going to. Granted, his name will always carry value, and he has the job forever. But for fantasy, I don't know if he's going to be providing. He hasn't provided top 10, and again in a full year now. So, if anyone fell out, I think it would be potentially him. Honestly, I think Burrow, from a statistics standpoint, is safer than Mahomes. Burrow has the weapons. He had the blow up game this past week. His defense stinks, so they're going to be throwing more. So that's, if I was being spicy, that's the one I would probably pick.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say he'd fall out of the top 10, but I was going to ask the question to the two of you on what you thought would happen with Mahomes, because I was actually shocked when you pulled this up that he was number 1 going into the season after last year. I knew he'd still be high up, but I thought for sure Josh Allen would be ahead of him. So he just has that name, and he's a really good live quarterback, but yeah, he just hasn't been great for fantasy. I don't see how he stays number 1.
Everyone was down on Allen because he didn't have weapons, but Mahomes. The thing is, everyone just gives Mahomes a pass for everything in fantasy. But if you look at trying to win a game with stats, he's not doing that for you. But again, I don't think it will happen in reality because his name brand is too big.
Yeah.
He won't fall out of the top 10, but he should
No.
fall significantly. He should definitely not be number one.
Yeah. What about some players who could rise up?
Into the top 10.
I got a couple names that I'm not saying with conviction that will rise up, but I feel like could. But I want to see if you guys have any first.
I'll throw out because I didn't have the balls to do it a couple podcasts ago, but Justin Fields, I'm going to throw him out there because
I can see it.
Because you can see the path. Right, they're 3-0, and if he keeps playing, and they have a division winning season, and Russ never takes over, it's the path is there. So I think I would say Justin Fields.
The only one that I thought would be on there that wasn't when I first looked at it was Brock Purdy. I thought he'd be near the end. So I could see him sneaking in there in like the 8, 9, 10 spot.
Yeah, I think he's around like 15. So I think that's one. I agree. That was one of mine on the list. Once that, like, he's actually throwing for the yards, just isn't the touchdowns yet. But he's very safe, and he's going to get a massive contract this offseason. So
yeah, and he's really young, and he's got all the weapons in the world. So granted, they need to stay healthy. But
the other two that I had, and I don't have strong conviction with this because I think a few people have to drop out, and if they get in, they're getting it like number 10. So Baker is one. If he puts up another year like last year after getting a contract, I think people will turn around and be like, he was the first overall pick in the NFL draft. He's actually, everything's are clicking for him now, and he's got a contract, and you feel safe for the next couple of years with him. So that's one that I keep an eye on. And another one is Drake May, I think could, and there's a reason why. I think he's a more explosive passer than obviously Brissett is. He is a little bit more mobile than people give him credit. We know rushing helps. But I also think the transition will happen later, and he won't have a full season under his belt. And if he could just get hot for a couple games at the end and people see a rookie, that will just boost his value going into next year. So if he starts like, I don't know, 10 to 8 games, and the last like 4 he looked really good in, and he's running around, I think he'll potentially shoot up into the top 10.
Yeah, Drake May I could see because, like you said, people love rookies. So if he gets a chance and he looks good for a couple of games, his stock will definitely skyrocket.
I think it'll depend on the rushing. But there's a chance.
Yeah. Again, not saying any of these with conviction, but these, if I'm trying to see the tea leaves, that's kind of what I'd be throwing out there. Moving over to running backs, a little bit more volatility actually in this position, as you can tell from the rookie running backs that we mentioned. Looking back over the past 3 years, we've actually had an average of 5.3, and that actually came down this last year because there was only 4. So before that, it was 6 running backs kept dropping out of the top 10 each year. So a lot of turnover happens in running backs. We get that. Older running backs, once they hit a cliff, they drop like a rock, and you'll see some of these values really plummet. Injuries are a huge factor here. So a lot of volatility here. But from last year, the players who fell out were Kenneth Walker, kind of slipped out. He went from 7 to 11. So it's a little bit of cheating, but technically out. Austin Eckler, he was at number 8, plummeted to 39 after a horrible year. Josh Jacobs was at 9 and then slipped down to 14, mainly because he was very efficient last year. And then Nick Chubb, he was at number 10, had a gruesome injury. Still haven't seen him back on the field yet, but he plummeted all the way to number 40 going into this year. So those are the last 4, but in previous years, there was a lot more volatility. But running through the running backs currently who are going into the 2024 as the top 10, we had Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane, Christian McCaffrey, Travis Etienne, James Cook, and Kyren Williams were the top 10. So we're expecting at least 4, but likely 5 of these guys to drop out going into next year. Who you got?
Yeah, I mean, this one feels easier absent of injury. Mm-hmm. It really just seems like you can almost guarantee that McCaffrey is on his way out. From an age standpoint, the fact that people are going to have a sour taste in their mouth pretty much regardless this season, however it turns out at this point. ETN, I think, is probably looking like he's trending out. Yep. Unfortunately for Devon Achane, if they don't get a quarterback, he might be trending out. And the only other one that I would throw out there is maybe Kyren, although I don't know. I'm so skeptical of Kyren, although last week he his 3 touchdowns beat me in several leagues.
He sensed your
Yeah.
skepticism in that.
Yeah, I mean, like those to me,
Yeah.
to me, it just feels like those are the guys. Like Cook at this point is looking like he's
Cook
going to
looks
move up.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. And absent injury, Bijan's safe, Brees is safe, Gibbs is safe, Barkley's safe, Taylor
Taylor,
probably safe, but on the fringe.
I
But
think Taylor could slip, but I don't think he
yeah,
like plummets. But I could see him slipping out.
yeah. So it's just it feels like which of those guys that we talked about or that I just like called out do you feel like the most confident that is on their way out?
I mean, if Christian McCaffrey doesn't play this year, that's like a slam
That's
dunk.
what I was going to
Yeah.
say. As
Yeah.
crazy as it sounds, he's definitely got to be the one.
Which is crazy because before he was actually people were thinking maybe he's the one because he is just such a game wrecker. But yeah, I think he's at ETN to me is definitely falling out. He's just too inefficient as well.
You don't like him to begin with.
Yeah, I've already been out on him, and he's like not making any good case for himself. Kyron to me is risky, and the thing this is like I could see him being like a Kenneth Walker, where like he barely slips out, and the same thing with Jonathan Taylor. Like I could see these guys barely slipping out for each someone who's younger with more upside. Because like Taylor, like he looked decent at moments this past week, but I just don't think he's gonna like everyone thinks about the years that I think it was like back-to-back years he like dominated. I just don't think those are left in him with the current offense with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. So I think people are like, oh, he's going to really be more of a back in RB1, but he's older. That will knock him out of the top 10. But if they're dropping out, who do you guys think will potentially ascend and rise up into the top 10?
So what do you guys think about a guy like Zach Charbonnet, who's not the number one on his team, but looked great? For an injured Walker, he's young.
So my thinking is not. I like the thought. And I was thinking and along those same lines, but I was more thinking maybe along the lines of like a guy like Trey Benson, who is like the guy like Connor in front of him is on the last year of his deal before he's an unrestricted free agent, and he's on the older side. And if he does get injured at some point this year, and Benson has the opportunity to like demonstrate what he's got in Arizona, like it probably wouldn't take much. Probably take like 2 or 3 game absence from Connor and Benson going out there and putting up big numbers. And then the Cardinals move on from Connor in the offseason, and Benson all of a sudden is up in the top 10. So like along those same lines, my concern with Charbonnet is just that Ken Walker has actually looked really good. Yeah. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he himself did an about face and made his way back into the top 10.
Yeah, Walker was one of mine that I think would get back in. His is just injury. If he's healthy, Walker looks like awesome. He looked like week 1, he looked incredible, which makes it tough for Charbonnet to get in unless he. Who knows? If Walker's hurt all the time, so that would.
I was in the same thought process as Joe. Yeah. Like that backup running back that if he gets a chance looks really good and could jump into the top 10. But yeah, obviously he has Walker ahead of him, who is technically not going to be that guy that drops off.
He's looked pretty strong when he's been out there. Well, it was one game, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see I think he's supposed to be back this week if he picks right up where he left off, or if that was just like I'm assuming he will, frankly.
Yeah.
I feel like.
And a couple of other guys I had. Jonathan Brooks, the rookie who hasn't played yet, he's still around number 12, so it won't take much for him to go up there, but if Dalton now at quarterback, I think that offense will look pretty decent. And if he is what people thought as it coming up at his rookie, I don't see how he doesn't ascend. And then a dark horse guy, I mean, we've talked about him. I feel like we're becoming quite the podcast for him. Brian Robinson, I feel like could have a shot if he keeps building. Obviously, the past 2 weeks, not as big of or maybe just the past 1 week, not as big of an output as you were hoping for. But I think he's a very solid rusher. I think that offense is looking pretty decent right now. And he doesn't really have a lot of competition. His only competition is really Eckler. So if he has if he finishes the year with like double-digit touchdowns and 1,000 rushing yards, I think he could potentially ascend up into the back half of that top 10.
Yeah, I'm with it. I agree.
We're all on the beat, Rob. Moving over to wide receivers. Actually, a lot of volatility here as well. So over the past 3 years, we've seen an average of 5.7 of the top 10 drop out year over year. Just it's very tricky to get an absolute elite untouchable wide receiver, which is why in Dynasty they're so hard to acquire in trades. But last year, some of the wide receivers just fell out. You had Jalen Waddle, who was really rising up. He dropped down to 13. Olave just snuck out, and he's at number. He went into number 11 going into this year. T. Higgins plummeted from 8 to 28, and Stephon Diggs, we have documented this pretty well, but he was at number 10 and he dropped all the way to number 36 with the way the back half of last year ended. So going into this year, the top 10 that we had are at 1, we had CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Tyreek Hill, and Puka Nacua. So, who of these top 10 do you think are going to fall out? Because at least half of these are expected to drop out going into next year.
I mean, I think the bottom 4 all are going to drop out. A.J. Brown. I mean, Garrett Wilson, I don't know, unless he starts connecting with Rodgers, I think he's going to fall out. Tyreek Hill, just because of age and, who knows what's going on with his quarterback. Yeah. And then Puka, I got to see something out of him this year to keep him in the top 10. So I feel like the top 6 are pretty solid and the bottom 4 are going to go. But how do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think A.J. Brown is susceptible. He's hurt. And the Eagles don't look like they are, in the same form that they were in 2 years ago to start this season. And so that's potentially going to be a concern for him. Tyreek, if Miami doesn't get a quarterback, I think that'll be a challenge for him too. Plus, he was kind of like saying some stuff about retiring early anyway. And granted, he went back and, reworked his deal, and he hasn't said anything about it since. Like, that could honestly make a difference if all it takes is like one report of, Tyreek is mulling his future, and that could make a difference for him. So Garrett Wilson, I want to see more from him, frankly. I want to see a little more this season. It's a small sample size. The Jets run the ball a lot. That's just like part of their identity. And I think he still is like building up chemistry with Rodgers. I think as the season progresses and the games get more important and they build up a repertoire together, I think we're going to see the Rodgers to Wilson connection start getting a little bit more, like the Rodgers and Devontae Adams connection, where he's just like lighting him up, especially in the red zone too. So I agree. He's definitely in the category of could slip, but I want to see a little more first with Rodgers.
Even if he has a good year, though, what happens with Rodgers after this year? Like, who knows who his quarterback is for Dynasty?
Yeah, I feel like he's at a ceiling right now, and he's not performing at it. So if other players,
I disagree with that. I don't think what he's doing now is.
I meant at ranks. I don't see.
I
don't see the top 6 being cracked. So he's at 8 right now. I don't think he could get into the top 6. I don't think that's possible, and he's underperforming with what you want. And then the QB situation maybe isn't that great going into next year. So. Yeah, I don't think he's not talented. I could see a lot more things happening that knocks him out of the top 10 than keeps him in, to be honest.
Yeah, pretty fair.
Yeah, and then the Puka situation too, like obviously he's hurt right now, but also who knows how long Stafford's playing too. So I think that I don't think Puka tumbles a ton, but I could see him slipping out for sure. He's got a lot of questions there. I mean, it feels like the top 6 are just like solidified. Like I just don't see how those guys don't maintain. They're all performing. They're all studs. They're all young.
The crazy part, though, if you look at the last 3 years, and like you said, on average 5 to 6 drop out, one of them is going to drop out. But looking at the top 6, I don't know. I don't see it.
Yeah,
it's hard. Maybe Amon-Ra. I don't know.
Yeah, he's still been safe and looking good. Like
I think
He's
they're
the
all
only
safe,
one
but
that,
he's the
yeah,
only one you could potentially question,
he's the
I
only one that
guess.
doesn't have the seal, like the ceiling. He's got like such a high floor, and don't get me wrong, he can put up big weeks, but he doesn't have the a- absolute upside that the other five in the top six have. But yeah, I think those guys are all safe. But if at least four, we'll say, since that's all we can find, dropped out, who are some guys that might sneak in that you guys like?
Well, the first thing I asked is where was Nico Collins? He's got to be right there.
He's 11.
Yeah.
He's 11. So yeah,
I was
that's
gonna
a
say,
layup. I had that. Nico is gonna definitely be in. Nico should be in right now,
yeah,
in my
he's
opinion.
gonna be. He's gonna pass a couple of
Yeah.
those guys, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I think if things continue on the path that they're on, Rashee Rice has like a slim chance of sneaking into the
Yeah,
back end of the top
he's at
10.
13 right now, so
Yeah,
I think that's an easy one too.
yeah. So, and then maybe, I know, Dave, you're going to like this, but maybe Jaden Reed.
I had Jaden Reed. That was one.
Yeah.
He's further down, but I think Jaden Reed. He looks unreal. It looks like should be the number one for the
It's going to
Packers.
take a lot more for the rest of this season to get him in there, but it's possible.
He has to do once Love comes back. He has to keep it up. But if he keeps it up for the rest of the season, I think he could sneak into like 10. But he looks great. I was actually trying to talk to Canals about getting him before recording the spot because I knew it was going to blow up my spot. But I think Reed has a decent shot. Ayuk is another one I throw out. He's already at 15. If Debo departs next year and Ayuk rounds back into form, and like Purdy signs the contract going to next year, you just have two guys in long-term contracts that know each other well and have great chemistry and really have big games. I think he probably slots back into the top 10.
Yeah.
All right. And then finally moving over to the tight ends. Actually, less volatility here. This past year was actually the first year there was a lot of volatility, but usually it's kind of a lot of stalwarts. And honestly, it's a dart throws this year, so it doesn't even really matter. But the past 3 years, the average was 3.7, but that was propped up by 5 last year dropping out. It was actually the bottom 5 all dropped out. You had Dallas Goddard dropped to 15, Pat Fry moved to 16. Greg Dulcich was actually in the top 10 at 8. He's down to 26 now. David Njoku barely slipped out to 12, and Darren Waller retired. So he's fully out. Doesn't even have a rank. But going into this year, we had Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce, and Jake Ferguson actually sneaking in. So who do you think is going to be dropping out of this group? Because honestly, it should only be about 3 or so, but we saw last year it could be bottom out completely.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with the tight ends here. I mean, let's start with the two big names, Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce. You'd have to assume after this start, they're both dropping out of there pretty easily, right?
Kelce for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Kelce more likely than Andrews.
Yeah.
Andrews has a chance of redeeming himself. And I guess Kelce does too, but I guess the odds are more in favor of Kelce, given that Kelce was already slipping.
Yeah, and he's just older. Andrews is not old for tight end, but he also has like the threat of likely continuing to emerge potentially.
Yeah.
Andrews does nothing.
I also think Jake Ferguson is in some trouble, just only because he is one of those guys similar to Njoku and Freiermuth and Goddard who made their way into the top 10 on the wings of like a pretty good season last season, and they're just like not really being like many other options there. And I don't really necessarily see him like duplicating last year's season. He hasn't been thus far. Granted, he's hurt, and he had a pretty good game last game. But I just think there'll be other options. There'll be new hotness, and I don't see. Guys like Laporta and McBride, I could see definitely slipping towards the back of the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
But
they're just so young, though, and
that's what I'm saying. Like a lot of the guys in this list, at the top of the list specifically, are like young enough, really, all the way through like Hawkinson. I really don't see too much turnover.
I agree. I don't really see much slipping here. Because I think this is what I was saying for previously. It's only been about 2 that drop out. And last year, one of the reasons why there was such turnover, it was that we had this massive influx of youth pop up this year. I don't know if we're going to be getting that again. That seemed like a pretty rare occurrence. So I feel like maybe going forward, you're probably going to be locked in the top 8 or 9 of the tight ends there. But I think Kelsey and Ferguson probably slip out. Maybe Kittle just because he's very volatile. But again, like I still think the path for him to have targets is probably going to stay there. So I don't have a lot of confidence there. And honestly, there's only one guy who I could think maybe rise up. But I'm going to see if you guys have any dart throws of who could sneak into the top 10.
Not really. I mean, Cole Kmet's someone who's near the top right now. I don't know how valuable they'd be in the future, but
my man, Brenton Strange ass.
maybe.
Yeah.
It's tough because you need to be really good. You need to be a top 2 target in your offense. To make the top 10 in Dynasty, probably top 3 is what you want. And there's not a lot of opportunities there that I'm seeing there. Like, even Kmet, like the wide receivers will likely be there, but who knows? He has had blown up games. One guy, and this is a complete dart throw, but I'm throwing out Ben Sennett. If Daniels is dominating and Ertz finally freaking retires and gets out of everyone's way, Sennett in flashes looks pretty good, but he's a rookie. So going into next year, he can maybe have the McBride pop. So we'll see. But I think that could be someone who maybe gets the number 10 slot.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. I agree.
Yeah,
I definitely see the path.
Those were the ADP reviews. So keep that in mind when you're posting trades. Try to get ahead, get value for the top 10 when you can, and try to get the guys who are going to sneak in going next year. But going to move into our next segment, Joe. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I think we're ready to get into the Joe Bottles prop parlay and other potentially profitable pick kitchen. Last week, we'll review last week, but first, you guys might have heard that we recently partnered with BetStamp and Sign Up Expert, opening up an incredible opportunity for you to join some of our favorite sportsbooks to get the best odds and new user offers. If you guys are into sports betting, which I sure am, you have to understand that over the long term, getting the best of the number and having multiple outs to shop around is absolutely critical, especially when it comes to prop bets. And our dedicated page over at signupexpert.com/NSFW can help you do just that. Head over and you'll see a nice, convenient list of all the sportsbooks available in your geographic region, along with sign-up offerings from each. If you're ready to take your sports betting game to the next level and show us some love, head to signupexpert.com/NSFW and check out what options you have and enjoy some nice new user sign-up bonuses. And let us know if you sign up using the code. Maybe a little in the league chat. Hey, we signed up, got a winner on one of your guys' bets, and we also use your code. So, all right. So now on to the segment. And first thing we're going to do is recap last week's performance. So, Dave, I'll kick it over to you. Why don't you let us know how you did last week and what it's looking like for this week?
Yeah, so I gave out too many bets last week. Stop doing that. It's not a profitable way to go. I think any real better would know that. So I gave out 10 bets. I ended up going 3-7. So, not the worst, but could have done better. Some of these definitely were weird, too. The Ayuk not getting any of the targets was weird. Brian Robinson absolutely burned me. And I think with Marvin Harrison Jr., I think he missed by 1 yard. So that one stung. So it's going to be better this week, but I'm going to curb down the amount of bets I put out on this pod. But if you know me, I'll be sharing my other bets I have. What about you, Joe?
So a couple frustrating ones. Quentin Johnston pissed me off because I took him under in a tough matchup. Yeah, 2 catches, both in the first half, both early in the game, both like 22 fucking yards.
Yeah.
And he's over with, I think he ended up with 42 or 44. If you know me, you know that I may very well be going back to that this week. Although there's no lines up without Justin Herbert, so I don't really know if this is the weakest. And like in Kansas City, like Taylor Heineke actually is half decent at throwing the ball downfield, so that's probably a stay away. Don't do that. Amari Cooper got there towards the end. It was looking a little dicey for a minute. He started off hot and then got there for us. Brian Robinson let us down a little bit in the passing game, and it's just weird. Cost me a parlay and a straight bet, and that was just really unfortunate. And But Zach Moss came through on the ground. So between those 4 picks, we went 2-2. We vigged out minus, probably half a unit in vig. So not great, not terrible. Oh, and the same game parlay was had the chance at the end. I think we only lost the SGP by Jalen Hurts rushing yards.
Yeah.
Barkley got the long touchdown for us. Olave was heavily involved, caught a long touchdown to go over. It was we were looking all right, just didn't get the Hurts rushing that we needed. But so for this week, it's an interesting situation where a lot of the games, some of these guys that we're targeting don't have lines up yet. We mentioned this earlier, right? Like there's some uncertainty about Tank Dell, so Nico Collins, or really a lot of the receiving props for that game aren't up yet. There's some uncertainty around Arizona's health, and so as a result, the lines for that game, which has the highest total of the week and probably the 2 worst defenses, aren't up yet. So gonna give some picks between Dave and myself that we like as of right now, and I'm just gonna mention keep an eye on Nico Collins for when those lines do go up. It's definitely going to be something that I'm going to be playing on, and I'd probably recommend. And who else? There was one other. I'll think about it before the end of the pod. Dave, why don't you give us your 2 picks now? And I actually am just noticing, looking at the doc, that we're going to be targeting the same offense with 1 pick from each of our selections. So what do you got?
I dig it. As you mentioned, I'm dialing my picks back, trying to be a little bit more profitable for the listeners. But the first one, straight play, Najee Harris over 64.5 rush yards. Right now, it's not on FanDuel yet, but it's actually on DraftKings at minus 115. He's passed this line every single week so far. And there's no Warren, who's going to be hurt, so he's going to get all the volume there. And the Colts run D before last week against the Bears, and the Bears have no O-line. I don't know if you saw that play with Swift on the goal line where the D-line was in under a second where 5 of them were in the backfield. The Colts run D is not good. They were actually the worst ever through the first 2 weeks of the year. So I think Najee Harris will easily surpass this line. So I'm definitely going to be betting the over on his 64.5, as that is how they're getting a lot of the offense going. So that's the one bet. Now, the next 4, I like all 4 of these, but I like them so much that I'm probably going to end up parlaying them all together. But personally, I'll probably play some of these straight as well. But I'm just going to throw them all out, but feel free to take the parlay, which I feel pretty confident about all these. And I'm targeting one game here, and it is the Panthers versus the Bengals. Both of these defenses stink. The Bengals are desperate for a win, so I think they're going to be throwing a ton. And the Panthers look pretty good with Andy Dalton. And we mentioned Thielen is out, so that's going to consolidate targets a bit more. So I usually look for that. When there's less players involved, you can really target the remaining players for their receptions and or yards. And again, the Bengals D is probably worse than the Panthers D. The Bengals D is just so bad. I'm going to probably target them the entire year for overs. So the lines that I'm liking and I'm going to probably parlay together is Deontay Johnson over 63.5 receiving yards. This is at minus 114 at FanDuel. All these are on FanDuel right now. Deontay Johnson over on his receptions at 5.5. Xavier Legette over 35.5 receiving yards. This was actually at 31.5 when I looked at it at noon. I looked at it again earlier and already shot up 4 yards. I think other people are catching on to what I'm thinking with no Thielen. It can't be all Deontay. I think they're going to be thrown to Legette as well. And Legette is a physical specimen and can get a lot of yak play. So that's probably going to be the one I go the heaviest on the straight plays of Legette yardage. And then Jamar Chase over 71.5 receiving yards as well. I was huge on Chase on Monday night. Paid off for me, but I'm going to go back to that well. Seeing someone who definitely wants to get a win now that they're 0-3. But I'm also going to parlay all these together. And when you parlay all these together, it comes out to plus 679. So almost 7-1 on those odds there for a game where I don't think there'll be a lot of defense.
Yeah, I really like it. And we can actually go in and lock that in as our podcast's same game parlay of the week.
Let's do it.
I like it. I think that coming off of me coming up short the last 2 weeks, we need to change up the mojo. And I think this is the play that's going to get it done. I actually really agree with Leggett, and I think that line is going to continue to climb. So I may very well make my way over
I'm gonna lock that
to
in right now.
the apps and throw some shekels on that right after we are done recording here.
I'm so mad I didn't do it at noon. Like 31.5. So easy.
All right, so for mine, I'm going to give out two. The first one I'm going to give out, and I don't even have it in the show doc, but the more we've talked about it, the more I'm feeling good about the matchup. Is going to be Brees Hall over. I think the number right now is 69.5 or 70 rushing yards. Denver has been pretty bad on the ground, and yeah, I mentioned it a couple times earlier. I feel like every time I watch the Jets, I am impressed, and I'm taking note of the volume that they're willing to give to the running backs. I think there's probably a slight bit of opportunity or a window for maybe a lower line on Brees against not a very good rushing defense because of the Braylon Allen volume and hype, I guess, if you could call it. It's been a little bit of a Braylon Allen hype train over the last couple weeks. So I think getting Brees Hall in a game where they're probably going to run the ball a lot, and Denver does have Patrick Surtain in the secondary, which he can lock down a top receiver pretty well at home with that defense against Bo Nix. I get the impression that the Jets are going to look to just, not try to do too much and give the ball to their backs. So Brees Hall over 69.5 rushing minus 110. That's available right now. And then my next one, be a little more fun. I'm going to go first time this season. We're going to climb the ladder. And for those of you who are not familiar with climbing the ladder, it's basically when you take a player's prop and then you take incremental alternate lines of the same prop for slightly less unit sizes as you go up. So in this particular example, we'll take George Pickens over 50 receiving yards. I like that as a play for one unit. And then I think I'm going to put a half a unit on over 75 receiving yards plus 250 and a half a unit on over 100 yards plus 550. The logic here is Indianapolis's defense has not been great as far as defending the wide receiver. They're particularly susceptible to the outside wide receiver, and they give up explosive plays quite frequently to outside wide receivers. They've given up over 100 yards to two receivers so far this year. I think it was Nico Collins and Roma Dunze. And they've given up big games to other outside wide receivers as well. Only concern from my perspective is that the offense is not great and Pittsburgh's defense is very strong. But I also think this is, I mentioned those fishy lines earlier this week. I think this is another one of those fishy lines where Pittsburgh is a team that's getting quite a bit of hype right now. And Indy is a team that is not getting talked about very kindly. Their quarterback play is horrific, and it just feels like, Steelers only laying 1.5 at the Colts just feels like an easy one, and it's just never that easy. So I think it'll probably be a tight game, and Pickens averaging 15 yards a catch throughout the course of this season so far. I realize it's small sample size, only 3 games, but 15 yards a catch in over 3 games, and had 85 week 1, had 57 last week. So yeah, we're going to go Pickens 50. The main play is George Pickens over 49.5, 50 receiving yards. And if you want to sprinkle a little more on, the alternate line, 60, 70, 75, 80, depending on what site you look at. I was looking at Bet365. Bet365 had over 70 plus over 75 plus 250, over 100 plus 550. So we'll play a little bit with that for some upside this week. And we will ride with Dave, our fearless leader, on the same game parlay of the week.
We're gonna do it, guys.
Let's cash that one.
Yeah, and I do love ladders because once they start hitting and they just like every next play, that player just keeps cashing more and more. It's so much fun. Or
And
like,
it's just I feel like it's fun with a guy like
oh,
George Pickens too,
it's explosive
because
plays. You can
he
get
can
it all in
literally
one play.
get 75 yards in on two plays, right?
Yeah.
Like one if he gets like 140 or 50-yard catch, not only have you locked in a unit, but now you just need like two or three more catches and you're gonna have a big day.
Oh yeah. But even if he's right at the line and then he has one massive catch, you hit like 4 bets in a row. It feels so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's win some money, but no guarantees. But we feel good about
Yes, no
it.
guarantees. Just a little bit of fun, right?
It's
Like
a little bit
throw,
fun. It's a little sprinkle.
just some fun. All I can do is tell you what I'm putting on it, and you have to make,
Listen,
you know,
gamble
decisions that fit
responsibly,
your risk appetite.
have a budget, have rules,
Yeah,
and get wild with the boys.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, we're gonna move in to the final segment of our NSFW Dynasty League Corner. Give everyone a little update on how the league's going. So as I mentioned, we do a high-low score, the highest and lowest score on the year. And every week we've actually had someone beat the high and beat the low, so it keeps moving there. So for the high, it's still the same team, just new high scores. Mike Caffer and Mike Williams, they beat their week 2 high, and they are now at 175.52. So it's creeping up again. That's a score that I think will be beat later in the year, but it's getting more respectable. And we have a new low again for the third straight week, and it's actually Kropa, who's just his whole team is just completely destroyed by injuries. So not much he can really do there, and then just trying to survive. But his score of 78.62 is the new low mark in the league. Again, probably a score that will be beaten, but going to start sweating it out now. Now that we're 3 weeks in. Also, with it being 3 weeks in, we are at now through divisional league play for the first 3 weeks of the season, and then we'll have this again in the final 3 weeks of the season. But the winner of each division gets an auto bid into the playoffs. So these were very important and pivotal matchups. And actually, the leader in all three leagues are undefeated. They ran it all. So you got Mike Caffer and Mike Williams. Obviously, they got two of the weekly highs, but they are also undefeated in their division, which I've renamed the Mike Caffer and Mike Williams division because they own it now. Schluter owns his division, so he gets the division name called Schluter's division. He's 3-0 as well, and I'm actually going up against him this week, which I'm a little worried about. He's the heavy favorite. But in the final division, which is Dave's division, yeah, that's mine because I am 3-0, and I won it last year, so I really do own this division right now. I might be the weakest of the three, but I would say after last year, my team is putting up a much better performance. Where I was a very low scorer last year, just got lucky. My team's been pretty respectable, but yeah, how you guys feeling? Where are you guys? Not in first. That's right. Joe and Ryan are not in first place,
Yeah.
so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, Joe and I are sitting at 1-2. Schluter at 3-0 is not great for us, but we'll see how it goes. Still early in the season.
Yeah, so I will point out the irony of the fact that in this league, my team is 1-2. Dave's team is 3-0. I have an astounding 450 points against after 3 weeks, and Dave has a paltry 300 points against after the first 3 weeks. In another league that we're in, my team is horrific. It is maybe the worst fantasy football team that I've ever drafted or played in my entire life, and that team is 3-0 and has some like astonishing number of points against in the first 3 weeks of
Joe's
like
averaging like 80 points a game.
100. I think I have 175 points against in
Yeah.
3 weeks.
The last place team actually has, I think, 0.3 points less scored than Joe's team, and that team is 0-3 and Joe's 3-0. But they basically put up the exact same scores.
So it's just funny how that can work out differently in one league versus another.
Joe, I will say your week 1, I think, was pretty low. So you've had some pretty big weeks after that, and you had one really bad matchup against Schluter where you put up a huge score, but just hit a buzzsaw. But my team, it gets the wins because it's consistent. I've never scored less than 117, and I've scored more every single week so far. So got to get that high watermark, man.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, you have a lot of guys that are putting up points.
Yeah, not my quarterbacks.
They may not be the hottest names, but they're putting up points.
Jawan Jennings is doing. Gesicki steps up. I am just. It's all waiver wire guys, man. I'm just finding my way to a W.
Yeah.
I mean, you got 22 from Lamb already this week so far. So
finally, let's go. I need one more touchdown on him. It's the last part of my parlay, and everything else is hit. So please, Lamb, score a second touchdown. But anyway, yeah. Well, that is pretty much the pod so far. Any final thoughts for the listeners?
No, that's all we got.
Well, go out there, get those dubs, and Schluter, coming for you, man. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the NSFW Dynasty Podcast. Tune in next time.